Now, as you know, the federal government seems to be inching towards net zero 2050. Remember, that's the position Joe Biden is going to want Australia to adhere to. Michael McCormack, though, floated one hell of a idea balloon in front of all of us, which is that agriculture would not be affected. Presumably, this would allay the concerns of nervous members of his own backbench. We'll find out whether that is the case with Matt in a second. But if it is the case, then it is a pretty significant win for regional Australia.
And there's no way known that we are going to whack regional Australia, hurt regional Australia in any way, shape or form just to get a target for climate in 2050. It's not going to happen. Prime Minister said it's not going to happen. We get there, we'll get there through technology. We'll get through our technology roadmap.
All right, Matt, there's a few things that we have to jump through, a few things we're going to take on notice here. But to the central question, if agriculture is not part of it, does that change your feelings about net zero 2050?
No, it doesn't. I think this is a bad deal for Australia. I don't think we should sign ourselves up to such a mythical target because, unfortunately, we have a tendency in this country to actually do what we say. So when we signed up to the Kyoto Agreement, we were one of the very few countries that met its targets when they came due last year. Canada and New Zealand, who like to preen themselves on the world stage on these matters, they didn't meet their targets. So I suppose, if all we were going to do was just pay lip service to it, do what every other country does, and then do nothing about it, well, maybe who cares? But that's not how Canberra works, and I've seen it time and time again. So yes, I don't want to see it applied to agriculture, but I don't want to see it to our mines. I don't want to see it applied to workers in factories. Because this will cost thousands of jobs if we were to adopt this, particularly given China's never going to do anything. I mean, why would we sign up to a climate agreement which relies heavily on China complying with it to work?
I loved your tweet about this weekend.
When they haven't even complied with the trade agreement the last 5 years. They can't be trusted, and therefore all of this is moot. It's completely moot and ridiculous, and we've got much, much bigger things to worry about in our country right now.
Now, Joel, how do you feel if ag was left out of net zero 2050? How would you feel? Have they found the way around this?
I'm not sure what that means, Paul. I mean, the Prime Minister was very clear this week. He's now signing up to net zero emissions by 2050. He's just not quite prepared to say it yet. But I couldn't follow Michael McCormack this morning. I listened to him very carefully. I mean, if we're going technology and not taxes, what is it that agriculture is going to be excluded from? Is there a nasty surprise coming down the track? Is Scott Morrison now going to increase his existing carbon tax? He does have a carbon tax, by the way, Paul. It's called the Safeguards mechanism, which, of course, imposes a tax on any company that emits more than 100,000 tonnes of carbon each year. So I find this very curious, but I'll further say that we should see an opportunity for agriculture here, not a challenge. I mean, they are well placed to fill the net bit. The net means we're not going to put any more carbon into the atmosphere than we are taking out. And no sector is better placed than the farms to play a big role in the sequestering of that carbon out of the atmosphere. So whatever we do, we should make sure that agriculture is a winner here, not a loser. But I just want Michael McCormack to explain, or even Matt or someone, what it is he wants the agriculture sector exempted from.
Now, Michael, does it feel like we're... Yeah, well, OK, let's go to Michael first, though, and then you can jump back in here, Senator. Do you think that we're on our way to an elegant solution here, or one that not enough people will buy and they'll be willing to cross floors and things won't happen? But, of course, if Labor turns around... And this is one of the things that... And, Joel can pick me up on this if he wishes, right? One of the many things that is misremembered about, Turnbull and National Energy Guarantee and all of that stuff, right, is that if Labor wanted to vote for it, it would have happened, right? The only reason it didn't happen was because Labor sat back and let the shit show take place. So if net zero 2050 is going to happen, presumably it'd be Labor and the government voting together. Yes, some people would protest against it, but I would imagine when faced between a policy outcome or a shit show, oppositions will always choose the latter.
Yep, correct. Mate, what is really aggravating about this debate is how shallow the debate is. It's basically, here's a target. OK, There's only one question, Paul. What does that mean for Australia? What does that mean for Australians in 2050? So what it means in 2050 is no coal mines at all, no gas, probably no oil. It means cement plants probably have to close. Lots of heavy industries will have to close. So the question is, not do we think there's an elegant solution in getting there, is there or isn't there? No, that's not the question. The question is, what does it mean for our country? How are planes going to fly? Are we going to have green fuel for planes, are we? What is going to happen to our country in 2050? And every 5 years back from 2050 to now, we should be told by the government, state and federal and the UN, what does that mean for individual citizens and their daily lives? Because this preposterous debate in a vacuum of whether we agree with something in 30 years' time, well, no one's going to be around. You're not going to be on air. You might still be, but I won't be on. None of us are going to be here, buddy. But what does it mean for our country, for goodness sake? This glib sort of vacuous, vague talk in a fog about some mythical target 30 years down the track is meaningless. The whole debate is meaningless. Yeah. And by the way, Joel, we're not supporting you for leader, mate. We're supporting Elbow.
Correct.
Don't get a big head.
But Michael,
we're on Elbow's side.
Michael, that was very articulate and passionate, but it was wrong. There will be coal mines and there will be planes in the sky using jet fuel as they do now.
Where will the coal mines be, Joel?
Well, we don't take into account
the whole world.
We do not.
Hang on. The whole world will be net zero, Joel. Not just us. That's the deal.
Well, okay, Joel, then Matt.
We do not take into account our Scope 3 emissions in this equation, but
the whole world is signing up to net zero.
It has to be net because there will still be jets in the air using jet fuel. So we can't have zero emissions. The net part is the important word. That is that Joel, we use technology to take more carbon out of the atmosphere. So we're putting no more in than we're taking out. This is a pretty simple concept that
how do you do that?
Seem to struggle to get their heads around.
All right, come on, Senator.
Well, Michael summed it up brilliantly, and this is why I'm very worried about this, because what will happen is they're trying to sneak this in, right? They're trying to sneak in this target. Don't worry, stay asleep. It'll all be okay in 30 years' time. And then what will happen after we've signed up, then you'll get the bureaucrats kick into gear. We saw exactly what happened with Kyoto, and farmers in this country know exactly what happened. We signed up to Kyoto, and then state governments restricted land clearing, and now we only clear about 50,000 hectares of land a year, barely enough to keep farming land constant. 30 years ago, we were doing 688,000 a year and actually growing our farm sector. So farmers have had their property rights stripped away from them, and that is the only reason we met Kyoto, because we stopped clearing land and we had this ridiculous...
Who signed Kyoto, Matt?
To get carbon credits for that. So, yeah, exactly, Joel. I think it was one of the worst decisions we've had. Well, you ratified it, but we signed it, and it was one of the worst decisions we've ever made.
Who signed the free trade agreement with China?
Yeah, and again, that's turned out to be a complete...
You keep complaining about all the things your government have done.
We hope better. Well,
sounds like we've been better off with the Labor government.
Change, and I see... And look, Joel, if you want us to go down this path, I was 16 when we signed up to Kyoto. And yes, the free trade agreement with China's changed, right, on that front. But coming back to this central issue here, Joel, we can't have coal mines in 2050 if we get in this path, because the whole world will be net zero. And if the rest of the world is not net zero, why are we doing it? Why would we do it?
Up on carbon
because you said we don't have to count Scope 3 emissions. But that would only matter if China is still burning coal. Come 2050 or their commitment in 2060, and they will be, because they won't.
So you've given up on technologies like carbon capture and storage, and
I'm realistic.
Carbon capture and utilisation. Have you given up on those
sites in your area? Well, let's go through that, Joel. Let's actually look at the detail here, not these glib talking points. There are no carbon capture storage locations in the Hunter Valley. You know that.
All right.
So you're consigning all of your miners to a false promise in the future. There are none.
You don't need them in
There are some in the Surat Basin, there are some in the Gippsland Basin, but you can't. You will not be able to suck all of this carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere that we do from planes, factories, by planting trees. Not going to happen.
Over 30 years.
Best dinner party ever. I'm cool with it, but we'll get to ads in a second here. Sorry to cut it off early. We'll get to the fight more in a second. But Joel, you quite correctly. back, I think, December last year, we're out there tweeting about, stop shit-canning blue-collar workers. It's the other end of the spectrum that seem to have different views about climate action and all the rest of it, right? And there's an opinion poll that popped around today suggesting that the biggest group of people aren't working, aren't middle, aren't upper middle, but 28% of the wealthy say that we should invest in non-renewables. So, again, the coal, all the rest of it, right? And 39%, which is the biggest demographic, not working class, not middle class, not upper middle class, think the government should not take action on climate change. What does it tell you, Joel?
Well, it tells me a couple of things, Paul. It tells me, or reaffirms that working people, including those in the blue collar, the high vis, do want us to take action on climate change. They do support renewable energy, but not at the expense of traditional and existing jobs. When they're polled, you ask them, do they support action on climate change? They say yes. But if you then ask them whether they still supported it if it was going to cost them their job, they'd say no. But the other point about this poll is here's another example of trade unionship money being used on an opinion poll, which reflects this obsession some trade union leaders have with climate change and renewable energy. Why is union money being used on this opinion poll? Why isn't this unionist out there doing what they've traditionally done, and that's to look after the interests and aspirations of the people they represent?
Well, Michael, this is the Victoria Trades Hall Council. 43 unions they represent, 3,000 people in Victoria asked.
I think the poll's rubbish. You can sometimes ask a pollster about a poll and indicate the result, and they got the result they wanted. You go to the last federal election and the Liberal Party had the biggest swings against us in the inner city seats in Melbourne of Higgins, Kooyong, Melbourne Ports and Goldstein. They were amongst the worst performing seats out of the 151 seats that were contested. So a large proportion of that was, obsessions about global warming. So the poll is an utter nonsense. And of course, as we know, the guilt-ridden upper classes who've got plenty of money and too much time on their hands worry obsessively about these things because they don't have to worry about a mortgage, mate.
All right.